The Battle of Stalingrad was the most protracted battle for a city in the entire war. During the 7-month struggle for the city, both sides suffered over 1 million casualties. It is rightly considered the turning point of World War II. The Reich had never suffered such heavy losses. Let's look at this battle from the German perspective. From his headquarters in occupied Ukraine, Hitler signed Directive 41, which outlined the main actions for capturing Rostov, Stalingrad, and then the oil-rich regions of Baku. After the start of the war, oil supplies to Germany were severely limited and came primarily from Romania. Both leaders understood the importance of oil for a modern war. Therefore, Hitler ordered the development of a plan to seize Soviet oil. The operation was codenamed Operation Blau, the second strike for final victory in the East. After the winter defeat in the Battle of Moscow, Germany intended to finish what it had started and achieve the goals of Operation Barbarossa by the end of 1942. While developing plans for the new campaign, Hitler decided against a new offensive near Moscow, as the General Staff had insisted. He concentrated his main efforts on the southern front. The Wehrmacht was tasked with defeating Soviet forces in the Donbass and the Don River, breaking through to the North Caucasus and capturing the oil fields of the North Caucasus and Azerbaijan. Hitler insisted that without an oil source, the Red Army would be unable to wage an active fight due to a lack of fuel, and the Wehrmacht, for its part, needed additional fuel to successfully advance on Moscow. For the operation, 1,300,000 soldiers and 1,500 aircraft and tanks were ordered to be prepared. In July 1942, Hitler ordered Army Group South to be divided into two parts, each assigned an independent mission. Army Group A continued its offensive in the North Caucasus, while Army Group B was ordered to break through to the Volga, capture Stalingrad, and cut off lines of communication. Due to the insufficient number of German troops, it was decided to bolster their numbers with troops from Paulus' allies and the satellite countries of Romania, Hungary, and Italy. This was Hitler's first mistake, as the German allies' troops were inadequate for the war in this theater. On July 17th, the Battle of Stalingrad began. German troops advanced. It took the 6th Army almost a month to establish control over the area west of Stalingrad. The campaign was already going wrong, with the Germans suffering greater losses than expected. But the 6th Army was only a few dozen kilometers from Stalingrad, and the 4th Panzer Army, located south of it, turned north to help take the city. Meanwhile, Army Group A continued to advance deeper into the Caucasus, but its advance had slowed. Morale among the soldiers was high. It seemed that the campaign in the east might finally end with the enemy's surrender, and they would return home. Following his strategic miscalculation regarding the location of the Germans' next attack, Stalin had to quickly order and organize a major defense of the city named after him, and he did it his way. On July 28, 1942, Stalin addressed the Red Army with Directive Number 227, not one step back, demanding that they strengthen their resistance and halt the enemy advance at all costs. The harshest measures were envisaged for those who showed cowardice and faint-heartedness in battle. Commanders and political officers were tasked with conveying this order to every soldier. While the German army penetrated deep into the country in August, the Luftwaffe began an operation to destroy the city from the air. Thousands of aircraft took off, reducing Stalingrad to rubble. Between 40,000 and 90,000 people, mostly civilians, perished. More than 80% of all buildings in the city were destroyed, but they still had to serve as a fortress for the Soviet army. In September, the Wehrmacht launched an offensive along the entire front, attempting to capture Stalingrad by storm. The Soviet forces failed to contain their powerful onslaught, but the time it took the Germans to capture Stalingrad was decisive. The hopes of taking Stalingrad with a surprise attack thus suffered a final collapse. The dedicated Russian resistance in the battles for the heights west of the Don delayed the advance of the 6th Army so much that it was possible to systematically organize the defense of Stalingrad. Soon, the Red Army soldiers were forced to retreat into the city, and the fighting shifted to the streets. The Germans, advancing deeper into Stalingrad, suffered heavy losses. In the city, infantry fought face to face. This played into the Red Army's hands, as German aircraft and artillery were unable to operate at full strength due to the danger of friendly fire. Advancing slowly, the German forces nevertheless drove the enemy into the water. On the morning of October 14th, the German 6th Army launched a decisive offensive against the Soviet bridgeheads along the Volga. It was supported by over 1,000 aircraft from the Luftwaffe's 4th Air Fleet. The concentration of German troops was unprecedented. 3 infantry and 2 tank divisions were advancing along a front of only about 4 kilometers. However, the artillery on the left bank of the Volga began to run short of ammunition due to preparations for the Soviet counteroffensive. On November 9th, cold weather set in. The temperature dropped to -18 degrees. Due to a lack of warm clothing, just like the year before, the Germans were once again caught in the grip of winter. The Soviet units stubbornly defended themselves, supported by artillery fire from the eastern bank of the Volga. The offensive stalled. Meanwhile, Soviet generals were making the final preparations for Operation Uranus. The operation began on November 19th. Over 1 million Red Army soldiers were deployed. Just 3 days after the operation began, Paulus's 6th Army was encircled. The Italians and Romanians, who had been protecting the flanks, quickly retreated. Paulus requested permission to break out of the encirclement, but Hitler ordered him to put any thoughts of retreat out of his mind. He assured them that Germany would supply the necessary supplies by air and, if possible, break the encirclement immediately. On December 12th, German forces, consisting of battered units, launched Operation Winter Storm to free the 6th Army from encirclement. However, due to reinforcements from the reserve supply, the operation failed. The encirclement was maintained. Meanwhile, in besieged Stalingrad, units of Paulus's German army repelled Soviet attempts to capture the city. However, due to supply regulations, the army began to suffer shortages of ammunition and provisions. On January 9th, Paulus was presented with an ultimatum demanding the unit's surrender. After its rejection, the offensive began. During the operation, the army was divided into 2 parts and captured. Paulus, contrary to Hitler's wishes, refused to part with his life and was captured, where he began collaborating with the Soviet Union. More than 90,000 Germans were also captured. The German defeat in the Battle of Stalingrad was primarily due to Hitler's mistake in relying on the forces of Italy, Romania, and Croatia. In the event of a more or less powerful attack, these troops quickly fled, leaving their flanks exposed. As a result, the 6th Army was encircled, and then Hitler made another mistake by forbidding retreat. He might not have been able to take Stalingrad after this, but he would have saved up to 300,000 soldiers who could have influenced the future course of the campaign in the east. With this victory, the USSR would begin the offensive and liberation of its territories until the next battle, the Battle of Rzhev. And that's all for now. Watch other videos on my channel, and I thank everyone who supports the release of new videos. I'd be glad if you did too. Subscribe to the channel, like it, and if you liked the video, please leave your suggestions for future videos in the comments.